The house breathes an expensive silence. The rays of the San Diego afternoon sun stream through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a space that feels more like a modern art gallery than a home. Every white marble surface and every piece of minimalist designer furniture gleams, free of any dust or clutter. However, the air is cold, sterile, devoid of the warmth of a life lived. The garden outside, with its emerald grass and turquoise pool, looks like an untouched painting, a perfect and unattainable landscape. I, Eleanor, at 78 years old, feel like the only piece out of place in this exhibition of wealth and order. This house, bought with the money my late husband and I worked so hard to earn, has become my golden cage, a place where loneliness is as palpable as the cold of the stone floor beneath my feet. Sitting in my gray velvet armchair, I am a stain of the past amidst so much modernity. My shoulders, stooped by a weight that is not just age, sink into the soft upholstery. I wear a faded cardigan over a simple dress, clothes my son Richard calls old, but which to me are the last pieces of armor I have left. My eyes, often fixed on a vague spot on the wall, observe the world through a fog of memories and a subtle, constant fear. I have become an expert at moving silently, at taking up as little space as possible, almost as if apologizing for my own existence. Every step I take is measured, every breath held, so as not to disturb the oppressive peace that Richard cherishes so much in his immaculate sanctuary. Pretending to sleep has become my only refuge, my small act of silent rebellion. With my eyes closed and my breathing soft and regular, the world believes I am absent, lost in the fragmented dreams of old age. But in reality, I am more alert than ever. It is in these moments that my senses sharpen, that I hear Richard's whispered phone conversations, his impatient footsteps in the hallway, the clinking of ice in his whiskey glass. It is the only form of privacy I am allowed, a space where I can be myself, the invisible observer, without having to answer his condescending questions or endure his gaze that assesses me, measures me, and, invariably, judges me as a burden, a problem to be managed. My observation post is a heavy, dark mahogany cabinet that stands on the other side of the room. It is a piece that Richard detests, an heirloom from my old house that he didn't have the heart to refuse. The dark, beveled glass of its doors, which once proudly displayed my mother's porcelain, now serves a much darker purpose. From where I sit, the angle is perfect. The glass reflects a distorted but clear image of the kitchen entrance. It has become my periscope, my secret window to the truth hidden behind the facade of the caring son that Richard presents to the world. He has never realized the power this old piece of furniture has given me, and that ignorance is my only advantage in this dangerous game I didn't even know I was playing. Richard enters the kitchen, and my breath catches in my throat. His expensive Italian shoes make no sound on the polished floor, a testament to his controlled and deliberate presence. He wears a charcoal gray suit, immaculate even at the end of the day, the knot of his tie perfectly aligned. He radiates success and discipline, but to me, that perfection is an armor that hides the emptiness inside. My heart, a tired old drum, beats a rhythm of anxiety. It is a rhythm I have come to know well, a toxic mix of the residual love I feel for the boy he once was and the growing fear of the man he has become. He doesn't look at me, convinced I am asleep, and begins to move with a cold efficiency. He is preparing soup. The irony of the situation is so bitter I almost choke. A gesture of care, of nourishment, coming from the man who, in recent weeks, has systematically dismantled my confidence and my sanity with small cruelties. "It's for your own good, Mother," he says, when he stops me from using the phone, or, "You're getting forgetful," when he hides my mail. This soup, with its aroma that begins to fill the air, is not an act of love. It is a piece of theater, another scene in his long and calculated performance of the devoted son. It is poison served with a smile, and I know it in the depths of my soul, even before I see the proof with my own eyes. The crucial moment comes like a silent flash of lightning. Through the dark reflection of the glass, I see him stop, what he is doing. He looks over his shoulder, directly at my armchair. His face, which to the world is a model of charm and confidence, for a brief second, loses its mask entirely. The kitchen light hits his eyes, and I see something in them that chills my blood. A total absence of emotion, a calculating and impatient coldness. He is not looking at his sleeping mother. He is looking at an obstacle, a problem that needs to be solved once and for all. And in that look, I see the confirmation of all my deepest fears. Certain that he is not being watched, he reaches into his jacket pocket. What he pulls out is not a spice or a common ingredient. It is a small glass vial, the kind one associates with medicine or laboratories. The light reflects off its transparent surface, and my whole world seems to shrink to that small object in his hand. My chest tightens and the air becomes thin, difficult to breathe. It is a moment of terrifying clarity, where all the pieces of the puzzle fall into place. The manipulation, the isolation, the financial control, all of it has led to this moment, to this small vial that contains the next step in his plan. The fear I feel is primal, a wave of ice that shoots up my spine. His movements are quick, furtive, those of someone who fears being caught, but is at the same time confident in his impunity. The cap of the vial is unscrewed with a swift, silent gesture. He is so close, in his immaculate kitchen, committing the darkest act imaginable, and his calmness is what scares me the most. He believes he has all the power, that I am just a senile old woman, lost in the mists of my declining mind. His arrogance is his greatest ally, the assumption that my weakness makes him invincible. He doesn't see me as a person, but as an asset to be liquidated, and this realization is a wound deeper than any other he has inflicted. Then, he tilts the vial over the bowl of hot soup. A milky, odorless liquid pours out, instantly mixing with the chicken. Broth. There is no splash, no sound, just a silent and deadly contamination. The substance dissolves, disappearing without a trace, as if it had never existed. My mind registers every detail with painful precision. The way his hand is steady, the absence of hesitation, the way the steam from the soup rises and envelops the vial for a moment. My heart feels like it has stopped beating. I am witnessing my own son's attempt to erase me from the world, and the scene unfolds in the dark glass like a silent horror film. In that instant, something inside me breaks, and at the same time, something solidifies. The frightened, confused woman who cowered in this armchair disappears, consumed by a cold flame of certainty. There is no more room for doubt, nor for the foolish hope that I was imagining things. The truth is there, clear and undeniable, reflected in the dark glass. This isn't about greed or control. It's about my life. He is actively trying to harm me, to hasten my end so he can finally have everything he wants. The pain of betrayal is immense, a wave that threatens to drown me. But beneath it, a new current forms, the instinct for survival. He acts as if nothing has happened. The vial is closed, returned to his jacket pocket. He stirs the soup with a spoon, his face once again composed in the calm, serene mask of the caring son. The transformation is so quick and complete that it is monstrous. He is a consummate actor, and the world is his stage. He picks up the bowl, the heat rising toward his impassive face. To anyone else, he would be the picture of filial devotion, caring for his elderly mother. But I have seen what lies behind the mask. I have seen the monster, and now I can no longer unsee it. My story is just beginning, a story that needs to be shared so that no one else has to go through this terrifying silence. Elder abuse often happens in the shadows, behind the closed doors of beautiful homes like this one, perpetrated by those we should be able to trust the most. If my voice reaches you now, wherever you are, I ask you to subscribe to this channel and tell me in the comments from which city or country you are listening. Your presence, even if virtual, reminds me that I am not alone in this fight I am about to wage. Your solidarity is a light in the darkness that has befallen me. He approaches the living room, balancing the steaming bowl on a tray. A patronizing smile is plastered on his face. "Mother, wake up. I made you some hot soup. You need to eat." His voice is soft, melodic, the sound of betrayal. The fear is still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but beneath it, a new strength is being born. It is the strength of anger, of wounded dignity, and the will to live. I will not drink that soup. I will not be erased. I will fight. I open my eyes slowly, look at him, and for the first time in a long time, my gaze does not waver. The battle for my life has begun. Before me, Richard holds out the bowl of soup, his face a mask of manufactured concern. "Drink it, mother. It will do you good." My hand trembles as I take it. The warmth of the ceramic is real, but everything else feels like a sham. I look at him, the man my son has become, and my mind travels back to a time when his hands were small and his intentions pure. I remember him at 6 years old, running through a field of daisies, his blonde hair flying in the wind. He came back with a crushed bouquet, the little flowers already wilting in his clenched fist. "For you, Mommy," he said with the most genuine smile I had ever seen. Where did that boy go? When was the love in his eyes replaced by this calculating coldness? That boy used to cry when he scraped his knee, and only my kisses could heal him. I remember sleepless nights by his side, with a high fever, my cool cloth on his forehead, singing lullabies until his small body relaxed and fell asleep. I was his safe harbor, his whole world. His father, Robert, was always more distant. Focused on building his financial empire, he taught Richard the value of money, of success, of power. Perhaps I was naive, thinking that my love would be enough to teach him the value of the human soul. Now, I see that his father's lesson was the one that prevailed, growing inside him like a weed that choked all the flowers I once planted. When Robert died 5 years ago, my world collapsed. Richard was my pillar, or so I thought. He arranged the funeral, handled the paperwork, and with impeccable logic, convinced me to sell our family home. "It's too big for you, Mother. Dangerous. Come live with me. I'll take care of you." It seemed like a gesture of love, of filial duty. I, drowning in my grief, agreed without hesitation. I handed him the keys to my life, believing he would keep them safe. Little did I know that he wasn't offering me a sanctuary, but leading me to a cell, whose bars would become more visible with each passing day. The move was the first step toward my erasure. My old furniture, my photographs, my books, most were deemed unsuitable for the aesthetic of his home. They were sold or donated. I was left with a guest room and a few boxes of memories. Gradually, my connections to the outside world were severed. My old friend Martha used to call every Tuesday. One day, Richard told me she had called to say she would be busy for a while. Weeks later, I found out by chance that Martha was worried because Richard had told her I was too confused to take calls. He was building a wall around me, brick by brick. At first, I doubted my own mind. The grief, the move, the age. I convinced myself that I was becoming the burden he subtly implied I was. When I couldn't find my wallet, he would discover it in an obvious place, sighing with false patience. "Mother, you need to pay more attention." He would ask me questions about the previous day, and if I hesitated, he would shake his head with a pitying look. This psychological abuse was a poisonous fog, and I breathed it for so long that I began to believe the fault was mine. It was easier to accept that I was losing my mind than to confront the monstrous truth about my own son. My internal conflict was a silent storm. How could the same hand I held to cross the street be the same one that now measured poison for my soup? This paradox paralyzed me. Every cold look from him was a blow to my heart, but then a memory from the past would surface. His childhood laughter, a tight hug, and I would cling to it, desperate. Guilt gnawed at me. Where did I go wrong? Was I an absent mother? Did I love him too little? These questions echoed in the silence of the house, tormenting my sleepless nights. To fight him meant admitting my failure as a mother, and that was a pain almost too unbearable to face. The external obstacles were as real as my internal battles. Richard took full control of my finances under the pretext of simplifying things. My substantial estate, the fruit of a lifetime of work alongside Robert, was transferred to accounts I couldn't access. He gave me a small amount of cash every week, like an allowance for a child. "For your little whims, mother," he would say, smiling. I, who had once run a business, now had to ask permission to buy a new ball of yarn. The humiliation was a constant companion, a daily reminder of my powerlessness. Any attempt to reach the outside world was thwarted. He monitored the landline calls and had installed a complex security system with cameras in the common areas of the house. "For your safety, mother." But it wasn't to protect me from the world. It was to imprison me within it. I felt constantly watched, my every move analyzed. I tried to speak to the cleaning lady once, a friendly young woman named Maria, but Richard entered the room at the exact moment, interrupting our conversation with a coldness that made Maria recoil. After that day, she barely looked me in the eye, afraid of losing her job. Cute bond between us, once the most precious thing in my life, was now twisted into a dynamic of power and fear. The dialogues were short, tense. "Did you take your medicine?" he would ask, not with concern, but as a routine check. "Yes, Richard," I would reply, my voice a whisper. There were no more conversations, only interrogations. The emotional connection we once had was replaced by this suffocating tension. The house, despite its size, felt too small for the two of us, the air thick with everything unsaid, with the hostility that simmered beneath the surface of every forced interaction. Even in the face of his cruelty, a part of me still loved him. It is a mother's curse. We see the ghost of the child we once held in our arms, even when the man before us is a stranger. I remember one day when he had a severe headache. For an instant, his face contorted in pain, and I felt an overwhelming urge to care for him, to bring him a glass of water, to stroke his hair. But then his eyes met mine, and the vulnerability was replaced by irritation. "What are you looking at?" he snarled, and the moment shattered, leaving me heartbroken once again. Richard's soul sickness was evident, but I was trapped in his web. He had isolated me so completely that I began to feel like a spectral figure in my own life. The days blurred into one another, a monotony of silence and fear, broken only by his brief, tense appearances. He was killing me slowly, not just with the substances he put in my food, but by stealing my dignity, my autonomy, and my spirit. He wanted me to disappear, to become a non-entity, so he could inherit my world without the inconvenience of my presence. But hope, sometimes, hides in the most unexpected places. On a rainy day, Richard finally decided to clean out the junk of my late husband that was stored in the garage. He asked me to check if there was anything I wanted to keep. As I rummaged through a box of old electronics, among dusty cables and a broken radio, my fingers touched something familiar, an old prepaid cell phone that Robert kept for emergencies. My heart leaped in my chest. With trembling hands, I hid it in the pocket of my cardigan, feeling as if I had found the key to my own prison. That night, I could barely sleep. Adrenaline coursed through my veins. I waited until I heard the deep, regular sound of Richard's breathing coming from his room. In the darkness of my own room, I connected the phone to an old charger I had found in the same box. The small screen lit up with a green light, a beacon of hope in my long night. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone in my hands, feeling its weight, its promise. For the first time in years, I was not a helpless victim. I had a tool. I had a chance. The planning began in secret. During the day, while Richard was at work, I watched TV shows about law and justice. I jotted down names of law firms on small pieces of paper, which I hid inside the pages of my sewing book. I learned about seniors' rights, financial abuse, and restraining orders. The fear was still there, a constant companion, but now it was overshadowed by a new feeling: determination. I was rearming myself, rebuilding the strong woman I once was, piece by piece, in secret. Making the call was the most terrifying step. I had to wait for the perfect moment. One afternoon, Richard called to say he would be late for a meeting. My heart was pounding. I went to the closet, the most soundproof and secure place in the house, and dialed the number I had memorized. My voice was a trembling thread when the receptionist answered. Miller and Associates Law Office. I took a deep breath and said the words I had been rehearsing for weeks. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I need help. I think my son is trying to kill me. The woman on the other end of the line, whose name was Sarah, was incredibly calm. She listened to me without interruption as I poured out my story in hurried whispers, afraid that Richard might return at any moment. She asked precise questions, her voice conveying a mix of professionalism and compassion. She gave me clear instructions. Do not confront Richard, act normally, and wait for her contact. She assured me that I was not alone and that they could help. With her every word, I felt the weight on my shoulders lessen a little. I hung up the phone with sweaty palms, but with an overwhelming sense of relief. The first step had been taken. I had broken the wall of silence that Richard had built around me. The path ahead was still uncertain and dangerous, but now I was no longer walking it alone. The connection I made on that call, with a compassionate stranger, was more real and powerful than any interaction I had had with my son in the last 5 years. It was a lifeline thrown into the darkness, and I clung to it with all my might. The tension in the following days was almost unbearable. I had to maintain the facade of a frail, submissive woman, while inside, I was a strategist planning my liberation. Every meal he served me was a test of nerves. I pretended to eat, hiding the food in napkins to discard it later. Every smile I gave him was a carefully crafted lie. Living this double life was exhausting, but the promise of freedom fueled me, gave me the strength to continue the performance. I watched him, no longer with the eyes of a deluded mother, but with those of an adversary. I noticed his habits, his schedules, the small cracks in his armor of perfection. The anger I felt was a pure, cold energy, sharpening my mind and strengthening my resolve. He had underestimated the woman who taught him to read, the one who managed the family finances for 50 years, the one who survived the loss of the love of her life. He had mistaken my grief for weakness, my silence for submission. It was his biggest mistake. The fear of the impending confrontation haunted me. I knew that when the time came, I would have to face not only the dangerous man he had become, but also the ghost of the boy I still loved. It would be the final battle for my body, my mind, and my soul. I would have to choose between the memory of a past love and the possibility of a future. And for the first time, I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, what my choice would be. I would choose myself. Waiting for the lawyer's next step was maddening. Every ring of the doorbell, every car that passed on the street, put me on high alert. Richard noticed my agitation. You seem tense, Mother. Maybe I should make an appointment with Dr. Evans. He could give you something to relax. The veiled threat in his words was clear. He was preparing to take the next step in his plan to have me declared incompetent. Time was running out. I needed help to arrive soon. Finally, on a Thursday morning, while Richard was on the phone in his office, my secret cell phone vibrated. It was a text message from Sarah, the legal assistant. Be ready. This afternoon, 3 p.m., we are not alone. The message was short, cryptic, but its meaning was crystal clear. Help was on the way. The battle was about to begin. I put the phone away, took a deep breath, and went to the living room, sitting in my armchair to wait. My heart was a war drum, beating a rhythm of fear and, finally, of hope. The grandfather clock in the hall, another relic Richard despised, marked each second with a grave and solemn beat. 2:57, 2:58. Each tick-tock echoed in the silence of the house, a hammer pounding against my nerves. I sat in my armchair, hands clasped in my lap to hide their trembling. From his office, I could hear the murmur of Richard's voice on a business call, confident and authoritarian, completely oblivious to the storm about to break over him. The air felt electric, charged with an anticipation that left me breathless. I was not just waiting for help, I was waiting for my own resurrection. Promptly at 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. The sound, sharp and insistent, cut through the air like a blade. I saw Richard, through the ajar door of his office, pause and sigh with irritation at being interrupted. My heart leaped so violently I thought it would burst from my chest. This was it. There was no turning back. I watched him stand up, straighten his suit jacket out of habit, and walk toward the front door. His face wore an expression of annoyance, that of a king whose domain had been disturbed by a petty intruder. He had no idea that it wasn't an intruder at the door, but his day of reckoning. When Richard opened the door, his superior posture faltered for a fraction of a second. Before him stood not salespeople or neighbors, but two women whose presence commanded immediate respect. One, with dark hair pulled back in an elegant bun and dressed in a navy blue pantsuit, had the piercing gaze of someone not easily fooled. The other, with a softer face but an equally firm expression, held a folder and scanned the interior of the house with an appraising eye. The atmosphere of the house changed instantly, the cold, sterile air suddenly charged with the electricity of an inevitable confrontation. "Yes?" Richard asked, his voice quickly recovering its forced politeness. His financial advisor's smile appeared, the weapon he used to disarm the world. He sized up the two women, trying to categorize them, to fit them into his orderly world. "If this is about a donation, you can leave the materials in the mailbox. I'm in an important meeting," he started. To close the door, a casual gesture of dismissal, the way he dealt with everything he considered an inconvenience. But the lawyer's foot, clad in a smart, practical shoe, blocked the movement with quiet firmness. "Mr. Vance, my name is Evelyn Miller, and this is Sandra Davis from Adult Protective Services," the lawyer said, her voice calm but unshakable, cutting through Richard's facade. "We're not here for a donation. We have an appointment with your mother, Eleanor Vance." The name, Adult Protective Services, hung in the air, and I saw the first flicker of panic in my son's eyes. His smile faltered, the color draining slightly from his face. He had been outflanked, caught by surprise in his own fortified territory. Control, which he prized so highly, was slipping through his fingers. He tried to regain control, resorting to his oldest tactic, my supposed senility. "My mother," he said, forcing a small laugh. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake. My mother gets confused sometimes. She doesn't make her own appointments. I handle everything for her. I appreciate your concern, but as you can see, she is perfectly well cared for." He gestured to the immaculate interior of the house, as if material wealth were proof of emotional well-being. He tried to position himself between the women and me, a protective guardian, but his act was transparent. It was then that I spoke. From my armchair, without rising, I used a voice I didn't know I still possessed, a voice that was not trembling or hesitant, but clear and firm. "Let them in, Richard." The sound of my own authority surprised me as much as it did him. "I've been expecting them." All heads turned in my direction. Richard's look was a mixture of shock and fury. The power dynamic in the room had just shifted, and everyone felt it. This was no longer his house, his domain. The battlefield had been leveled. Reluctantly, he stepped away from the door. The two women entered, bringing with them the scent of the outside world and an aura of purpose that filled the space. They did not sit, remaining standing in the center of the room like silent witnesses. Mrs. Miller turned to me, her eyes showing professional compassion. "Eleanor," she said softly, but with a clarity that echoed in the tense room, "is there something you would like to tell us in your son's presence?" This was the moment, the door opening to my freedom. I took a deep breath, feeling the air fill my lungs for the first time in a long time, and I looked directly at my son. "I saw you, Richard." The words came out, each one a stone thrown against his fortress of lies. I locked my gaze on his, refusing to look away. "I saw you put the substance in my soup, that day, in the kitchen. You thought I was sleeping, but I saw everything in the reflection from the cabinet." I let the words hang in the air, heavy and irrefutable. The silence that followed was deafening. I had said it. The truth, my terrifying truth, was finally out in the open, stripped of all doubt or fear. Richard's face went from pale shock to a furious red. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, trying to laugh, but the sound came out as a choke. "Mother, you're delirious. What have these women put in your head?" You know your memory isn't what it used to be." He turned to Mrs. Miller and Mrs. Davis, desperately trying to win back his audience, his jury. "She makes up stories. The doctor warned us this could happen. It's her age, dementia." But his words rang hollow, his eyes betraying the panic he tried to conceal. I didn't let him continue. I stood my ground, my voice gaining strength with each sentence. "It's not my memory that's failing, Richard. It's your character. You've been hiding my mail for months. You intercepted calls from my friends. You took away my access to my own money, treating me like a child. You made me believe I was going crazy, day after day." Each sentence was an accusation, a list of the invisible crimes he had committed against me. "But I'm not crazy. I remember everything." Mrs. Miller took a step forward, opening the folder that Mrs. Davis handed her. Her voice was calm and factual, delivering the final blow. "Mr. Vance, we have more than just your mother's word. We have a signed statement from Maria Torres, your cleaning lady, who witnessed on several occasions the verbal abuse and isolation you subjected your mother to. We also have preliminary financial records that show substantial and unjustified transfers from your mother's accounts to yours, totaling over $200,000 in the last 2 years. It was the coup de grace, the mention of witnesses, of concrete evidence, of numbers. Richard's armor, so carefully polished, shattered into 1,000 pieces. His facade of sophistication disintegrated, revealing the ugly, desperate man hiding underneath. His eyes widened, his mouth opened and closed without a sound. He looked from me to the 2 women, his calculating brain, realizing there was no way out. He was cornered, exposed, unmasked, and his world, built on lies, was crumbling around him. Then he exploded. The rage, so long contained, erupted in a torrent of venom. "You!" he screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You ungrateful old woman. After everything I've done for you, I gave you a roof over your head, food on your table. And this is how you thank me? Conspiring behind my back with these vultures?" His voice was shrill, unrecognizable. The mask had fallen completely, and the witnesses saw the monster I had been seeing for months. He was, with his own words, proving my entire case. With a strength I didn't know I had, I rose from the armchair. My legs were shaking, but I stood tall, my spine straight for the first time in years. I looked at my son, not with hatred, but with a kind of sad pity and an unshakable resolve. "You gave me nothing, Richard," I said, my voice resonating with absolute finality. You took my home, my money, my friends, my dignity. But now, I'm taking it all back, starting with my life." In that moment, the weak, frightened woman died, and Eleanor Vance was reborn. The echo of my final declaration hung in the room, sealing the end of an era. Richard's fury crumbled into a stunned silence, his face a mask of disbelief. He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as his frail mother, but as a force he could not control. With impressive calm, Mrs. Miller and Mrs. Davis stood, by my side, a silent honor guard. "I believe our conversation here is over," Mrs. Miller said to Richard. They gently guided me out of the house, into the cool afternoon air. As I crossed the threshold, I took a deep breath, the oxygen filling my lungs. It was not just air. It was the first breath of my freedom, leaving my golden cage and my jailer behind. In the days that followed, the law became my shield and my sword. Mrs. Miller acted with remarkable speed and efficiency. I signed the papers. For an emergency restraining order, my hand steady on the pen. Each signature was a step away from Richard and a step toward myself. The lawyer explained the legal process to freeze the accounts and begin the full recovery of my assets. It wasn't a dramatic courtroom battle, but a series of methodical, bureaucratic procedures that, to me, represented the systematic dismantling of the prison Richard had built. Each document signed, each phone call made, was another bar of my cell being sawed through. One of the most difficult and most important decisions was not to press criminal charges for the poisoning attempt. Mrs. Miller said I had a strong case, but I refused. This decision was born not of forgiveness, but of a deep need for self-preservation. Taking Richard to trial would mean chaining myself to him for more months, perhaps years, reliving the trauma over and over. I didn't want justice in the form of revenge. I wanted peace. Severing all ties, including legal ones, was the only way to truly heal. My final act of motherhood was not to protect him, but to free myself from him forever, leaving him to his own darkness. The departure from that house was done by proxy. I refused to set foot in that place again. Mrs. Miller hired a moving company that, under an assistant's supervision, collected the few belongings I still considered mine: my armchair, my boxes of photographs, my late husband's books, my sewing supplies. Seeing the truck arrive at the hotel where I was, temporarily staying, was a bittersweet moment. They were the wreckage of my former life, but they were also the foundations of my new existence. As I touched the worn velvet of my armchair, I felt a connection to the past, but with the promise of a future that would be entirely my own. My new home was not a mansion, but a sanctuary. After visiting several places, I fell in love with a senior living community called Willow Gardens. The contrast with Richard's house was overwhelming. Here, the air was filled with sounds: laughter from the game room, lively conversations in the courtyard, the soft sound of a piano being played. The smell was not of bleach and polish, but of flowers from the community gardens and freshly brewed coffee. I chose a small apartment with a sunny balcony overlooking a century-old oak tree. It was modest, but it was a home. It was a place for living, not just existing. The rediscovery of the small joys of autonomy was the sweetest part of my recovery. I remember my first trip to the supermarket alone. I spent an hour wandering the aisles, choosing my own fruit, reading labels, putting an expensive chocolate in my cart, just because I felt like it. I paid with my own newly issued debit card. The next day, I called my friend Martha. We talked for 2 hours, laughing and crying, without fear of interruption. Each of these simple acts was a declaration of independence, a monumental step on the journey back to myself, to Eleanor Vance. The meeting with my new financial advisor was a moment of sober validation. He laid out the spreadsheets, detailing the assets Robert and I had built over 50 years of hard work. I also saw the line showing the amount Richard had embezzled. Thanks to swift legal action, most of it was recovered. Seeing my name at the top of every document as the sole authority, the sole owner, was a moment of quiet power. The money wasn't the goal, but it represented my control, my security, and, as I would come to discover, my new mission. One afternoon, sitting on my new balcony watching the birds in the oak tree, the idea came. It came to me with undeniable clarity. I thought of how many other people, men and women, might be living in silence, as I had lived. People who might not have the financial resources to hire a lawyer, or the luck to find a hidden phone. The pain I had suffered could not be in vain. It had to be transformed into something bigger than myself. My suffering would not be an end, but a beginning. I had to build a bridge so that others could cross to safety. I scheduled another meeting with Mrs. Miller, but this time my role was different. I was not a victim seeking help, but a woman with a purpose, seeking guidance. I explained my plan: to use a significant portion of my inheritance to create a foundation, a nonprofit organization that would offer free legal and psychological support to elderly people suffering from family abuse. I wanted it to be called the Eleanor Foundation. Mrs. Miller's face lit up with a genuine smile. "Eleanor," she said, "that is the best way to rewrite your story." The following months were a whirlwind of purposeful activity. We rented a small office downtown. I hired a dedicated team, a passionate young lawyer, an experienced social worker, and a part-time counselor. I was involved in every step, from choosing the color of the walls to defining our mission statement. For the first time in many years, I was not fighting for survival, but actively building a legacy. The work was demanding, but every night I went to bed with a gratifying exhaustion, the tiredness of someone who is making a difference. The foundation's first victory was a milestone I will never forget. It involved a gentleman named Arthur, whose granddaughter had convinced him to sign over power of attorney and was draining his bank account. He came to us ashamed and defeated. I sat with him, not as the founder, but as an equal. I shared a bit of my story. I saw the recognition in his eyes. When our lawyer managed to nullify the power of attorney and recover his money, Arthur's tears of gratitude were worth more to me than any fortune. In that moment, I knew I had turned my poison into someone else's antidote. My life, once so isolated, is now richer and fuller than I ever imagined. The other residents of Willow Gardens have become my chosen family. We play bridge on Wednesdays, we have a book club, and we tend the community garden together. We share stories, support each other through sorrows, and celebrate joys. I have gone from being a solitary figure in a silent house to a matriarch in a vibrant community, bound not by ties of blood, but by ties of respect, affection, and shared experience. Today, when I look to the future from my balcony, I see not the twilight of my life, but a new dawn. The scars of the past remain, but they no longer hurt. They are a reminder of my strength, of my ability to survive and flourish. Richard has never contacted me again. He is a ghost from a past life, a sad memory that has lost its power over me. I managed to turn the worst betrayal of my life into my greatest achievement, building a beacon of hope from the ashes of my pain. My story is proof that true family is not defined by blood, but by respect, love, and protection. It is a lesson that dignity has no age, and that it is never too late to rewrite our own ending. True wealth is not found in bank accounts or luxurious homes, but in the strength of the human spirit, in the courage to face the darkness, and in the ability to transform our suffering into a light that guides others out of their own shadows. And that is a fortune no one can take from me. Have you ever done a kind gesture that changed a life? Leave a little heart if you believe that love is more powerful than any wealth. Subscribe for more stories of second chances. Comment, "Love has no price," if you also believe in human kindness.